Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You're not just listening, you're stepping into the warm, dark air of Egypt itself. The hum of your fan back home? Pretend it's the whisper of desert winds curling around sandstone cliffs. That pillow under your head? Consider it the shifting sand beneath your body as you lie there looking up at stars so sharp they could slice paper. We're about to wander together into the land of the pyramids and the Sphinx, those colossal riddles of stone that somehow keep their secrets even after 4,500 years. You're standing on the edge of Giza as the horizon turns a deep indigo, just before the stars take their full throne. Your sandals scrape the packed earth, and you feel how ancient the ground is, like every footstep presses against 4,000 years of memory. To your left, the hulking outline of the Great Pyramid rises. Once polished smooth, it caught the sunlight like a mirror, but now weathered, scarred, and yet still impossibly straight. You brush your fingers against a block of stone. It's rough now, chipped by centuries, but you can almost feel the ghost of smooth limestone casing that once gleamed white in the day and shone like silver under the moonlight. Imagine the glow, brighter than any neon billboard you've ever seen. And yet, beneath this grandeur, you hear the faint echoes of footsteps, workers trudging to the site at dawn, some with bread wrapped in cloth, others lugging jars of beer, shoulders burnt by the sun. It wasn't alien technology. It wasn't magic. Archaeologists today lean towards skilled laborers, rotating teams of farmers and craftsmen who built with pride. Imagine that, between tending fields during Nile's flooding season, they came here to chisel eternity. The faint yeast of their beer drifts from the workers' village, like a tailgate party before football, except with fewer nachos and a lot more hauling rocks. Still, there's tension in the air. Foremen shouting over the rhythmic chant of hauling teams. Ropes creak, dust billows up, and above it all, Pharaoh Khufu himself, distant and untouchable, believing this pyramid will transform him into a god among the stars. Not exactly a 401k, but effective. Your feet crunch forward and you drift past the pyramid toward a shape even stranger, the half-buried face of the Great Sphinx. At this hour, the shadows deepen its expression, making it look both serene and slightly annoyed, like a cat disturbed from its nap. Was this face Khafre, son of Khufu, or a far older guardian, adopted by pharaohs long after its birth? Even in the quiet of the night, the Sphinx refuses to answer, its mouth locked in eternal silence. But you don't mind. Tonight isn't about solving everything. It's about letting the story unfold slowly, like sand slipping through your fingers. The pyramids weren't built in a day, and neither will our journey through them. So you lean back against the cool stone, let your eyelids grow heavy, and listen to the desert breathe. The past is waiting to tell you more. The air shifts and you feel yourself pulled backward, like the desert is peeling open time itself. You step into an Egypt that doesn't yet have pyramids. The sand is still here, but the skyline is different. No hulking stone monuments, no giant cat faces. Instead, reed boats glide across the Nile, farmers lean into their hoes, and villages scatter like beads along the river's green thread. The year, roughly 5,000 years ago. Give or take a Netflix subscription. The story of the pyramids can't begin with the pyramids themselves. To your right stretches Upper Egypt, confusingly in the south. Narrow, flanked by cliffs, hot and dry. To your left is Lower Egypt, wide, swampy, rich in fish and papyrus reeds. Each with its own ruler, its own gods, its own pride. For centuries, they squabbled like siblings fighting over who gets the TV remote. Their rulers wear two different crowns. The white crown of Upper Egypt, tall, elegant, like a bowling pin, and the red crown of Lower Egypt short, boxy, like a Lego brick. Neither side wants to back down. You can almost hear the arguments. We have the falcon god Horus. Yeah? Well, we have Wadjet, the cobra goddess, and she'll spit venom in your eye. And then comes Narmer, sometimes called Menes. Around 3100 BCE, he strides into history wearing both crowns at once. The double crown. It looks a little ridiculous, like stacking hats in a thrift shop, but it declares, I rule everything from the delta to the cataracts. The pyramids you'll one day stand beneath, they sprout from this unification like fruit from a newly grafted tree. The unification isn't peaceful. You sense battles, dust, shields, war clubs smashing. The famous Narmer palette shows him bashing an enemy's skull with a ceremonial mace. Imagine making your LinkedIn profile pic that image. Power comes through violence, spectacle, and the claim, the gods favor me, therefore I am Pharaoh. Once unified, Egypt becomes more organized than most ancient lands dared to dream. Officials scribble in early hieroglyphs, tallying grain, counting cattle. Farmers pay taxes in barley and wheat. Suddenly this land has the muscle to feed armies, to fund artisans, and, most importantly, to think about building things that outlast human lifetimes. You step into a temple where incense curls upward, walls glitter with copper inlays. Priests chant to gods with falcon heads, jackals, and ibis. They speak of the pharaoh not just as a man, but as a god in human skin, a bridge between heaven and earth. If the ruler is divine, then his tomb must be more than a hole in the ground. It must be a cosmic gateway. The first seeds of pyramid thinking stir in the shadows here. Outside, the Nile floods. Farmers watch as it rises and falls, leaving behind black silt richer than any fertilizer. That steady rhythm convinces people the world is orderly, eternal. No wonder their architecture will chase permanence. No wonder they'll shape stone into mountains. You feel the logic click into place. Pyramids are Egypt's way of sculpting eternity into geometry. Still, unity is fragile. Villages gossip. Who is this man who calls himself both Horus and king? Why must we bow to him? The image of the pharaoh as god-king isn't yet habit. It's a performance, an experiment. If Narmer fails, the land might split again. But he does not fail. His successors strengthen the system. Dynasties form like links in a chain, passing power, rituals, and ambitions down the line. By the time of Khufu, Egypt will have honed its machinery of state so entire populations can be mobilized to build monuments that defy time. Tonight, though, you rest in the glow of a kingdom being born. The hum of insects mixes with the laughter of farmers, the hiss of crocodiles in the river, the chatter of officials measuring land with ropes and knotted cords. Egypt has just taken its first deep breath as one people. You smile because you know what's coming. Quarries, scaffolds, grand dreams. But for now, you let the quiet settle. The pyramids aren't here yet. They are seeds, sleeping in the minds of kings, waiting for centuries of Nile floods to nourish them. And you're standing at the riverbank, bare feet sinking into cool mud, watching Egypt take its first step into eternity. The river moves in the dark, like a silver ribbon. You're standing on its bank, cool water lapping at your ankles. The moon stretches a pale shimmer across its surface. For a moment, you forget that the desert looms just a few steps away. The Nile feels alive, like a great serpent slithering northward, curling through the heart of Egypt. And you realize this river is the secret engine behind everything. Without it, there is no bread, no beer, no temples, no pyramids, and certainly no Sphinx smirking out of the sand. Each year, like clockwork, the Nile floods, not chaotic, but rhythmic, steady as breath. Crops explode in the fields: barley, wheat, flax. You can smell the damp, earthy sweetness as sprouts poke up, promising loaves of bread and jars of beer. You wander through the farmlands, and it feels like walking into a painting. Men and women stoop low, planting seeds. Children chase birds that swoop in to steal the grain. Oxen drag wooden plows across the fields, their hooves sinking deep into the mud. Laughter, grumbling, songs rise with the sunrise. And in the distance, you hear the rhythmic slap of women pounding laundry against flat stones at the riverbank. Life revolves around this flood. They call it Happy, the god who sustains the land. You tilt your head back and imagine villagers staring at the stars at night, trying to predict when the waters will rise. When Sirius, whom they call Sopdet, appears just before dawn, they know the flood is coming. The Nile doesn't just feed people, it organizes them. Taxes measured in grain. Armies march on barley bread and beer. Surplus supports artisans, priests, architects, and whole crews of workers building monuments. This cycle of flood and harvest becomes the calendar of an entire civilization. 3 seasons, not 4. Flooding, growing, harvesting. Year after year, the same rhythm, like the heartbeat of Egypt. When a rhythm lasts thousands of years, you start to believe it's eternal. That belief seeps into everything they build. Some years the flood is too high, washing away homes and drowning fields. Other years, too low, leaving crops thirsty and people hungry. You wander further along the river, past fishermen pulling up nets heavy with tilapia and catfish. Papyrus grows thick in the shallows, and workers cut it down with knives slicing through the green stalks. They'll make mats, boats, and scrolls, thin sheets to write on. The Nile is more than resources. It's a highway. Boats glide past, some small, others large, with square sails catching the wind. They carry granite from Aswan, cedar from Lebanon, gold from Nubia. Without the Nile, building wonders would be impossible. Leaning on a palm tree, listening to frogs and rustling reeds, you realize the Nile shapes Egyptian imagination. They see time as a circle, repeating like the flood. Life, death, rebirth. Desert beyond the green strip reminds, without the Nile, death waits close. Sitting by the Nile, dipping your fingers into the cool water, you realize every loaf of bread, every jar of beer, every papyrus scroll feeds and inspires pyramid builders. The Nile is the bloodstream of eternity, carrying dreams northward until they solidify in stone at Giza. You close your eyes. The river hums. A jackal cries. The air smells of wet mud and roasted fish. The kingdom has its backbone, the land has its rhythm. All that's left is for human ambition to grab hold of this gift and aim it at the stars. You wake to the sound of hammers. Not the kind from your neighbor's DIY project, but deep, ringing thuds of copper chisels striking stone. You rub your eyes, and the Nile's green strip is gone. In its place stretches a wide plain just outside Giza, where the desert floor has been cleared, flattened, and marked like a colossal game board. The morning sun hasn't even fully risen, but the workers are out, swarming like ants across a landscape of half-carved blocks and dust. You can almost taste the grit in your mouth, feel it coating your tongue, gritty as sandpaper. Welcome to the job site of eternity. The blocks are enormous, each one the size of a small car, weighing more than your entire extended family at Thanksgiving. Men strain against ropes, backs bent, feet slipping in the sand as they drag sledges forward. Foremen shout, whips crack. not on human backs, but in the air urging rhythm. Someone pours water onto the sand in front of the sled. Suddenly, the load slides easier. You blink. Wait, is that a trick? Yes. Wetting the sand reduces friction, making it easier to drag tons of limestone. You wander closer to a quarry carved into the desert floor. Workers stand knee-deep in dust, chipping at limestone with copper tools. Sparks fly. The air is a symphony of clinks and grunts, punctuated by bursts of laughter. They wedge wooden rods into narrow cuts, pour water on the wood. The rods swell, forcing the rock to crack. Ingenious. It's sweaty, brutal, but methodical, like a dance choreographed by generations who know exactly how to coax mountains into blocks. Sweat mixed with dust mixed with fish oil lamps fills the air. You wipe your brow, though you're only a ghost here. Your back aches in sympathy. Look at their faces. These aren't broken slaves. They're tanned, muscled, eyes sharp with focus. Some hum songs, others chant in unison as they pull ropes together. Graffiti on walls joking about teams, little doodles of bulls or boats as mascots. It's ancient construction crews repping their squads. Off to the side, overseers with writing palettes dip reeds in ink and record numbers. How many men on duty, how many blocks moved, how much beer rationed. Beer is the real fuel here. Each worker gets jugs daily, thick and nutritious, more like liquid bread than a Friday night pint. Bread loaves stacked in baskets, still steaming from mud brick ovens. You wander through the dust and imagine the sound layering. Chants of pullers, crack of chisels, scrape of sledges, bark of dogs, murmurs of priests. Because yes, this isn't just construction, it's sacred theater. Before a block is set, prayers are whispered. Before a ramp rises, incense curls into the air. The gods are watching. Every block is both sweat and devotion. Not everyone is smiling. Calloused hands, cracked nails, shoulders raw from ropes. Injuries happen, a foot crushed, a chisel slipping. Some limp, others lie on mats while healers apply honey and herbs. Still, they return each morning, pulled by duty, belief, or the promise of beer at dusk. You glance upward at the half-risen skeleton of the pyramid. Dust hangs in sunlight, turning the scene into a hazy blur. This is where sweat turns into stone, and stone turns into story. The real miracle, thousands of ordinary people making something extraordinary. In the background, whispers. Slaves? Loyal subjects? Archaeologists still debate the truth. Evidence suggests a complex workforce with bakeries, breweries, and medical care. The sun climbs higher. The pyramid rises another layer, inch by inch. Shadows stretch long across the sand as evening approaches. Workers gather, tired but alive, joking as they trudge back to their village. Smoke rises from ovens. The smell of baking bread drifts. Laughter mingles with croaking frogs from the Nile. Tomorrow they'll return. More stone, more sweat. For tonight, the desert exhales, and you feel the rhythm of human ambition beating against the silence of eternity. The desert quiets for a heartbeat, and then you hear it. A voice, low and steady, curling through the air like smoke. It isn't the chant of workers this time. It's deeper, heavier, the kind of voice that expects you to bow before you even think of raising your head. You turn, and there he is, Pharaoh. Not Khufu yet, his predecessors first, the line of kings who've learned to shape Egypt's destiny with words as much as with armies. The moment you see him, you understand, pyramids aren't built with stone alone. They're built with voices, with declarations, with belief hammered into every skull along the Nile. He wears the double crown, absurdly tall and oddly balanced, but somehow he makes it look natural, like a part of his skull. His kohl-rimmed eyes scan the horizon, and you feel as though he's measuring not just the land but you, too. A priest kneels nearby, murmuring that the pharaoh is the living Horus, falcon god in human skin. And here's the twist. People believe it. Not as metaphor, not as poetry, literally. The pharaoh's voice is divine law, and to defy it is to tip the cosmic balance. You're ushered into a temple courtyard, where incense burns thick enough to sting your nose. The pharaoh raises his arms, and suddenly the crowd falls into silence. He speaks of order, of Ma'at, the great principle that keeps the world from sliding into chaos. His words ripple outward like waves. Ma'at isn't just justice. It's the sunrise, the flood, the beating of your own heart. And the pharaoh claims to be the guardian of it all. If he speaks, the Nile obeys. If he wills it, the gods nod. At least that's the story. You can't help smirking a little. Imagine your boss saying, "By the way, my promotion means I'm now divine, so please bring me coffee with reverence." But here, no one smirks. They kneel. They raise their hands. They chant. Because this voice has weight. It feeds them, terrifies them. It gives them a place in the universe. And you realize, without this theater, no one would haul blocks in the sun for decades. The pyramid isn't just a tomb. It's a loudspeaker amplifying this voice for eternity. Still, whispers slip through. In the workers' village, someone mutters, "How divine can a man be if he still gets sunburned?" Another jokes that the pharaoh snores like a donkey. Laughter flickers in the shadows, even as priests warn that mockery invites curses. Belief isn't uniform. It's a spectrum, stretching from awe to skepticism, and that's what makes it fascinating. The voices of the pharaohs weren't just sermons. They were contested, debated, reshaped by every pair of ears that heard them. You wander deeper into the palace. The walls glow with painted scenes. Pharaoh smiting enemies, Pharaoh offering to the gods, Pharaoh towering larger than any other figure. It's propaganda carved in stone, looping the same message. I am eternal. I am chosen. I am the axis of heaven and earth. You touch one of the carvings, cool beneath your fingers, and wonder how many times this message was repeated until it sank into the bones of a civilization. Even within this booming voice, there are cracks. Pharaohs die. Their mummies are wrapped, buried, and hidden. The voice that once commanded silence falls still. That contradiction gnaws at the edges of belief. If the king is divine, how can he rot? The answer, ingenious and desperate, is architecture. Build him a monument so massive, so eternal, that his voice continues long after his body turns to dust. But it isn't only power and politics. Listen closer, and you hear gentler tones. Hymns sung at sunrise, love poems scratched onto potsherds, lullabies whispered to children about the protective arms of the pharaoh. His voice echoes in ways you don't expect, in jokes, in prayers, in curses muttered under breath. Even the illiterate carry his name on their lips. In this way, his presence seeps into every corner of daily life. And yet, even now, historians still debate. Was the pharaoh a tyrant manipulating belief, or was he genuinely the heartbeat of his people's world? You catch yourself smiling because the question feels oddly modern. How much of leadership is performance? How much is faith? How much is fear? The desert doesn't answer. It just holds the echoes. You step back into the twilight, the temple fading behind you. The workers still pull ropes, The overseers still tally numbers. But now you hear the invisible soundtrack beneath it all. The voice of the pharaoh, resonating in every hand that lifts, every rope that strains, every loaf of bread baked in smoky ovens. Without that voice, the pyramid would never rise. With it, even dust obeys. The stars prick the sky, the wind cools, and you feel yourself being pulled forward again, toward dreams made of sand. The pharaoh's voice lingers, low and steady, like a drumbeat carrying you into the next chapter. The desert night thickens, and for a moment everything is still. Then you hear it, the sound of breathing, not yours, not the workers, but something deeper, like the whole land is exhaling. You glance up, and the stars blaze brighter than streetlights, smeared across the sky in a river of light. Somewhere in that glittering canopy, a man is staring too. His name is Khufu, and though you haven't met him yet, you already feel the gravity of his dream pressing against your skin. You see him not on the worksite, but in the hush of his palace. He's older than you expect, his eyes sharp with calculation. Around him burn oil lamps, their smoke curling upward, smudging the ceiling with soot. He leans over papyrus scrolls, sketches, rough diagrams, lists of numbers that look like they've been copied and recopied until they bleed ink. He isn't drawing triangles, he's sketching eternity. You realize that for Khufu, sleep isn't rest. Sleep is planning. He dreams in stone. And what a dream it is. A mountain built by human hands, bigger and straighter than anything ever seen, aligned with the stars, polished to blind the sun. A place not just to bury his body, but to launch his soul. It isn't just ego, though let's be honest, Khufu has plenty of that. It's theology, geometry, and ambition wrapped into one. Imagine telling your advisors, "So, I want the world's largest pyramid, taller than any before, and, it should last forever." Ridiculous, and yet, here he is, serious as stone. You drift closer, and you notice how even his silence is heavy. Courtiers kneel in cautious circles, waiting for his nod. Priests whisper hymns, trying to match his vision with their own. He doesn't shout, he doesn't need to. His dream is louder than any voice. You catch glimpses of him stepping onto balconies at night, staring at Orion's belt. Some say the 3 pyramids of Giza will echo those stars. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe Khufu wanted the heavens reflected on earth. As above, so below. The palace air smells of incense and honey. Servants shuffle in with trays of bread and roast goose, but Khufu barely notices. He's wrapped in something more intoxicating. The idea of being remembered, not just remembered for a generation, but forever. You sense his fear, too, though he'd never admit it, the fear of being forgotten, of becoming just another name lost in the dust. For him, the pyramid is insurance, not health insurance, not life insurance, soul insurance. Outside, you follow the whisper of the Nile. The steady current seems to answer him, yes, build high, build strong. The river promises resources, promises workers, promises endless cycles to sustain the project. Khufu hears it in his sleep. When you finally peek into his dreams, they're made of sand shifting into sharp lines, of ramps rising toward the sky, of his Ka, his spirit climbing block by block into the stars. But here's the twist. Not everyone shares his vision. Some priests mutter that the project is wasteful, a drain on resources. Some nobles whisper that Khufu's ambition is arrogance. The common people joke in their beer halls. Maybe he wants to block the sun itself with his giant triangle. Even today, historians debate whether Khufu was a tyrant or a genius, whether his dream was loved or loathed. The desert, as always, keeps its secrets. You walk through that dreamscape with him. Sand turns to white limestone. Moonlight gleams off phantom casing stones that don't yet exist. You hear phantom sledges dragging across phantom ramps. The dream is crowded with echoes of the future. Men singing work songs, foremen barking orders, children pointing up in awe. It's as if Khufu's imagination is so strong it bleeds into reality before the first block is ever set. And then you notice something else. In the corner of this dream, half buried in shadow, sits a lion's body with a human face, the Sphinx. It isn't awake yet, but it's there, waiting. Did Khufu dream of it too? Or would his son Khafre claim that vision? The mystery sits like a cat in the dark, patient, inscrutable. Even here, in Khufu's mind, the Sphinx refuses to explain itself. The dream shifts. Khufu rises, points to the horizon. The desert stretches endless, but in his mind's eye, it's already transformed. Where you see sand, he sees eternity. Where you see dust, he sees legacy. And you realize this isn't just a pharaoh building a tomb. It's a man building a future where his name outlives empires. And whether you admire him or roll your eyes, you can't help but admit he succeeds. You wake from his dream with your heart racing. The stars above Giza still glitter. The sand is still cool beneath your feet. But now you know the truth. Before the first block is laid, before the first rope tightens, the pyramid already exists. Not in stone, in sand, in dreams, in the mind of a man who refused to be forgotten. The dream fades like smoke, but when you blink, you're not back in silence. You're inside a room, a chamber filled with the scratch of reed pens against papyrus. Oil lamps glow like miniature suns, their flames jittering with every breath of air. The smell of ink and burning resin coats your throat. You lean closer, and you see rows of men bent over wooden boards, copying lines, drawing diagrams, muttering calculations. This isn't a place of stone and sand. This is where the pyramid begins, in lines and numbers no one outside these walls will ever see. You realize you're standing in the workshop of the scribes. Their hands move so quickly, the ink smears their fingers, their knuckles stained as if they've wrestled shadows. On the sheets, you glimpse tiny sketches, rectangles stacked like steps, triangles drawn with shaky rulers, measurements written in hieroglyphs. They don't look like much. If you stumbled across one in the dirt, you might mistake it for doodles from a bored teenager. But in this room, those scribbles carry the weight of eternity. A scribe coughs, and the others glance up nervously. You catch the tension immediately. These men aren't free to dream. They're under orders, translating a pharaoh's vision into something practical. Where to quarry, how to haul, how to align with the stars. There's no tolerance for error. Imagine your boss saying, "Hey, if you misplace a decimal, the afterlife collapses, and also the king might have you beheaded." No pressure, right? One man catches your eye. His reed pen hovers in midair, hesitating. He's young, his eyes still lit with curiosity rather than fear. He's drawing a cross-section of a ramp curling upward like a snail shell. You lean over his shoulder and realize this is the mystery archaeologists still argue about today. Straight ramp? Zigzag ramp? Spirals inside the pyramid itself? The kid is sketching one possibility, never knowing that people thousands of years later will debate his doodle on YouTube comment threads. The overseer strides by, sandals slapping against stone, eyes sharp as obsidian. He checks the papyri one by one, nods, frowns, nods again. The scribes lower their heads, pretending not to breathe. When he leaves, the room exhales as one. You hear whispers, Which ramp works best? How many men per block? What happens if the stone cracks on the journey? One scribe murmurs about aligning the pyramid with true north. Another wonders aloud whether they should mark the solstice sun with a sighting pole. They don't know it, but they're inventing architectural science in real time. And then you see it. Pinned to the wall is something stranger. A papyrus filled not with diagrams but with stars. Orion's belt, neatly dotted, lines connecting it to the horizon. At the bottom, a note scrawled in haste, "As above, so below." You feel a shiver. Were the pyramids meant to be mirrors of the cosmos? A map of heaven laid onto earth? Or just coincidence, the human brain finding patterns where none were intended? The scribes don't agree either. Some laugh it off, others guard the sheet like sacred truth. Here's a fact that slips between their whispers. Many of these plans will never survive. Papyrus rots, ink fades, and the desert wind is ruthless. That's why modern archaeologists haven't uncovered a master blueprint of the Great Pyramid. Nothing survived in neat folders labeled Construction 2560 BC. All we have are faint traces, indirect evidence, half-told stories. But standing here in the lamplight, you feel the urgency. They did exist, and they shaped every block that still towers on the Giza Plateau. You notice something else. Tucked in the corner, a priest in linen robes watches silently. He doesn't write, doesn't measure. He listens. When a scribe mentions the stars, the priest nods. When someone frets about the ramp angle, the priest mutters a prayer. It dawns on you that this project isn't just mathematics. It's ritual. Every calculation has a twin in theology. Every measurement is also a prayer. The pyramid must rise not only by strength but by cosmic harmony. The air grows heavy. You look at the young scribe again. His eyelids droop, his pen scratches slower. He yawns, then jerks awake, muttering something about a lion-faced guardian he saw in a dream. The others laugh, but you don't. You've seen that shape before, crouching in shadow. The Sphinx is whispering already, slipping into the margins of their imagination, even before it's carved. You step back and the room sways. The walls ripple like papyrus in the wind, and suddenly the diagrams scatter into the air like startled birds. They flutter upward, dissolving into stars above your head. The scribes don't see it, but you do. Their ink sketches have already become constellations. Whether they knew it or not, they were drawing both stone and sky. And just like that, you're outside again. The desert coolness presses against your skin. The Great Pyramid's future silhouette looming darker than the night itself. You can still smell the ink, still hear the scratch of pens. The hidden blueprints are gone from sight, but not from memory. They live in the stones, waiting for you to climb them. The desert shifts again, and suddenly you're surrounded by noise. Not the chanting of priests or the scratch of reed pens, but the low rumble of thousands of voices, the thud of sandals, the creak of ropes. You're standing on the edge of a sprawling encampment, a city that isn't supposed to exist but very much does. Torches flicker, fires crackle, smoke curls into the dawn. This is the workers' village, where the men and women who will raise the Great Pyramid sleep, eat, laugh, and sometimes complain loudly about their aching backs. You wander between mud brick houses, the walls glowing orange in the firelight. The air smells of bread baking on hot stones, mingled with the tang of onions and garlic. Somewhere nearby, someone has spilled a jar of beer, and the yeasty scent mixes with the dust, making the whole place feel like an ancient brewery. You're surprised at how alive it all feels. Not slaves shackled in misery, but laborers bustling with purpose. Many are farmers, summoned during the Nile's flooding season when their fields are underwater. Instead of sitting idle, they lend their muscles to eternity. Think of it like seasonal work. Instead of lifeguarding at a pool for the summer, you're hauling blocks that way as much as a pickup truck. Same tan lines, though. You hear laughter. A group of men sit around a clay jar, sharing thick beer that looks more like oatmeal than something you'd order at a pub. One tells a joke about a foreman slipping on a ramp, and the others roar with laughter, pounding their fists on their knees. You realize these men aren't faceless shadows. They're individuals with stories, jokes, rivalries. They even leave graffiti, scratching little notes on the stones. Friends of Khufu, drunkards of Menkaure. Archaeologists today have uncovered these marks, proof that the workforce had camaraderie, even pride in their teams. And here's a strange fact: their diet wasn't meager. Excavations at Giza show remains of cattle, sheep, and goats, meat enough to feed thousands. Imagine the logistics: herds driven across the desert, slaughtered, roasted, served with bread and onions. This wasn't a prison camp. It was more like the world's most exhausting company cafeteria. The workers needed protein because you don't drag 2-ton blocks on empty stomachs. Even athletes today would be jealous of their calorie intake. As you pass a tent, you glimpse a healer grinding herbs in a bowl, mixing them with honey to soothe wounds. Hauling stone takes a toll: splinters, crushed toes, strained backs. Without treatment, the project would grind to a halt. So doctors stitched, set bones, applied poultices. Their patients weren't expendable, they were essential. Each laborer was a cog in a massive machine, and every broken cog needed mending. In another corner, you hear singing. A chorus of voices, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. A foreman claps his hands to keep time, and the workers respond in unison. This is no casual tune, it's training. The same chants will echo on the ramps as they haul blocks together, rhythm keeping their movements synchronized. Without it, chaos. With it, harmony. The sound seeps into your chest, steady and strong, like a heartbeat shared by thousands. Still, not everyone here is content. You overhear mutters, complaints about pay, about long hours, about foremen who push too hard. Some wonder why they break their bodies for a king who will never see their faces. Others argue back. Building the pyramid means building a place in history, maybe even a blessing in the afterlife. You smile at the irony, they were right. You're literally standing here thousands of years later, remembering them. As you wander deeper, you notice rows of storage houses. Inside, sacks of grain pile high, jars of beer ferment, dried fish hang from hooks. The logistics are staggering. Feeding a workforce of tens of thousands day after day, month after month, year after year, this isn't something that happens by accident. It's management on a scale the world had never seen. Pharaohs didn't just dream big, they planned big. And yet, despite all this structure, life has its small moments. A child runs past you, chasing a stray goat. 2 workers arm wrestle in the dirt while others cheer them on. A woman kneads dough, humming to herself. It feels almost domestic, almost ordinary, except that everything here feeds into one purpose: raising stone higher and higher until it pierces the sky. You stop at the edge of the camp and look back. Torches flicker like stars on Earth, mirroring the constellations above. The workers' village is its own constellation, each person a point of light, each task a line connecting them. The pyramid may be the monument, but this living, breathing camp is the true engine of its creation. And yet, just as you begin to relax, a thought brushes the edge of your mind. What happens when the pyramid is finished? These voices, these laughs, these names scratched on stones, they will vanish, buried under the shadow of the monument. Their stories will dissolve like footprints in the sand. You glance at the men lifting their cups of beer, at the women baking bread, at the children darting between tents. Their lives feel so fragile against the backdrop of eternity. A breeze stirs, carrying smoke from the campfires. You breathe it in, and the taste of ash and yeast lingers on your tongue. You realize you're not just an observer, you're carrying their memory now. The workforce recruited, assembled, fed, housed, and healed. Anonymous in their time, but not forgotten in yours. The desert wind rises, and the camp flickers like a mirage. You blink once, twice, and the laughter fades into silence. The torches gutter out, leaving only the vast darkness of Giza. Ahead of you, the pyramid waits, its base sprawling wide, ready to climb. You shuffle forward, and the desert under your feet changes. Instead of loose sand, you feel hard limestone, rough and uneven, like the ribs of the earth exposed to the sun. You've walked right into the quarry, the open wound from which the Great Pyramid's bones are cut. The cliffs rise above you, scored with chisel marks, half-shaped blocks waiting like loaves of bread sliced but not yet served. The sound is relentless. Thunk, 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 copper chisels biting into stone, hammers ringing, chips flying into your sandals. You wince and kick them off, but they sneak back in anyway. Welcome to the glamorous life of an ancient quarry worker. The air is hot, filled with chalky dust that sticks to your tongue. You cough, and suddenly you understand why workers here always look pale. The limestone coats their hair, their skin, even their eyelashes, like a layer of flour. You're basically standing inside a giant bakery, except instead of croissants, you're getting 2-ton blocks. And unlike a bakery, the pastry chefs here carry bruises, aching backs, and maybe a few missing fingernails. You watch as a team wedges wooden pegs into narrow cracks carved into the rock face. Buckets of water are poured over the wood, and you hear the slow creak as the fibers swell. The pressure builds, invisible but unstoppable, until, crack! A slab of stone groans and slides free, like a tooth yanked from the jaw of the earth. It's both terrifying and oddly satisfying, like bubble wrap for giants. The foreman shouts, and ropes are flung around the newly freed block. Dozens of men lean into the lines, their muscles straining, their feet slipping against the dusty floor. The block inches forward, leaving a gouge in the quarry floor as it goes. You find yourself leaning too, your body tilting, almost tricked into joining their rhythm. And here's the fascinating part. The pyramid builders didn't haul every single block from far-off Aswan or Tura, like some legends claim. Most of the core limestone came from right here, just a short drag away. Why haul hundreds of miles if you've got a perfectly good rock pit next door? Only the finer casing stones, the bright white limestone that once made the pyramid shine like a beacon, were ferried in from Tura, across the Nile. Granite for the inner chambers, though, did travel the long haul from Aswan, hundreds of kilometers away. You can almost hear the groan of barges, low in the water, carrying those pink-red slabs like reluctant guests at a family reunion. There's a weird secret tucked in the quarry dust, too. Some researchers believe that traces of gypsum mortar found between blocks suggest a kind of proto-cement was used to smooth things out. Not concrete in the modern sense, but a clever binder. That's the thing about ancient workers. They weren't just muscle. They were engineers always looking for shortcuts. When your office job is to move mountains, every little trick counts. As you step deeper into the quarry, You pass a row of exhausted men resting in the shade of a half-cut wall. Their tools, copper chisels, dolerite pounders, wooden sledges, lie scattered around them. One man sharpens a chisel on a stone, the rasp echoing like teeth grinding. Another wipes sweat from his brow with a rag so filthy it probably makes him dirtier. A third just stares at the sky, lips moving in silent prayer, as if asking the gods for a lighter block tomorrow. Good luck with that. It's strange, though, you notice camaraderie even here, in the pit of toil. A boy runs up with a jug of beer. The workers take turns gulping, and for a moment the quarry feels like a lunch break at any construction site. One man tells a joke about the block being so stubborn it must be Khufu's mother-in-law. Laughter erupts, rolling off the stone walls, mixing with the ring of hammers. For a heartbeat, the dust doesn't taste so bitter. But then the foreman calls them back. The boy runs off, the men sigh, the hammers rise again. You stand there, watching the endless rhythm. Wedge, soak, crack, drag, rest, repeat. It's hypnotic, like a heartbeat made of stone. And yet, as always, questions linger. How exactly did they cut with such precision? How did they manage the sheer volume, millions of blocks, without machines? Archaeologists still debate the details. Some argue for ramps snaking up the pyramid, others for levers and counterweights. The truth may lie buried in dust, but the marks on these walls, tool scars, chisel lines, abandoned cuts, are proof of human persistence, not alien magic. The sun dips lower, shadows stretch across the quarry floor, and suddenly the pit feels like a giant hourglass. Every chip of limestone, every dragged block, is a grain of sand sliding toward eternity. You feel the pull of it, the labor, the noise, the dust, all funneling into a single monument that still waits on the horizon. You climb out of the quarry, your legs heavy with dust, your ears still ringing with the thunk of chisels. Behind you, the workers keep chipping, splitting, dragging. Ahead, the unfinished pyramid looms, its base sprawling wide, hungry for the blocks you've just witnessed torn from the earth. The desert wind sweeps through, and the quarry vanishes into haze, leaving you standing once more between earth and sky. You stand at the lip of the quarry, and suddenly the horizon changes shape. Down below, the Nile stretches like a ribbon of quicksilver, its waters flickering with sunlight. The river isn't just a pretty backdrop. It's the conveyor belt of an entire civilization. Without it, the pyramids are just a fantasy sketched in the sand. With it, they become possible. Tonight, you're about to follow the stones on their long, rattling, splashy journey from pit to pyramid. The first sound you hear is the groan of sledges. Imagine a block of limestone the size of a minivan, lashed onto a wooden sled with thick ropes. No wheels, too unstable in the sand. Instead, dozens of men lean forward, ropes over shoulders, sandals skidding in the grit. Their voices rise in a chant to keep the rhythm, a low, repetitive hum, not so different from the beat of a modern work song. Your pulse sinks to it without asking. The sled drags forward, but the sand resists. A foreman waves his hand, and a boy rushes ahead with a jar of water. He splashes it onto the sand in front of the sled's runners, darkening the ground. Immediately, the sled glides smoother, the friction cut in half. That's not a myth, by the way. Archaeologists testing this trick found it really works. Just a little moisture, and suddenly your 2-ton headache behaves more like a stubborn shopping cart than an immovable mountain. Still not fun, but manageable. The path leads toward the river, a wide ramp beaten flat by countless loads before. Along the way, you notice makeshift rest stops, clusters of workers crouched under reed shelters, jars of beer stacked like clay thermoses, bread laid out on woven mats. It's part labor camp, part moving picnic. You almost expect someone to pull out a lute and start strumming, but the only music here is the creak of ropes and the grunt of bodies. When the team finally reaches the Nile's edge, you're greeted by the sight of barges bobbing at their moorings. They're long, narrow wooden boats, lashed together with ropes, their hulls coated with resin to keep the water out. You watch as the block-laden sled is eased down a ramp onto planks, then carefully shifted onto the barge's deck. The boat tilts, the river groans, and for a moment you think it's going to capsize. But the crew steadies it, shouting orders, shifting weight, and slowly the vessel finds balance. And then the real magic begins. The boat slips away from the bank, oars dipping in unison, the current catching its hull. The stone that once lay buried in earth now floats like a sleeping whale, gliding toward the pyramid plateau. The Nile is full of these strange convoys. Barges stacked with limestone, with granite from Aswan, with cedar wood from Lebanon. Each one is a puzzle piece in the monument waiting to rise. From a distance, it must have looked like rush hour traffic on the water. Just fewer honking horns, more divine purpose. You step onto one of the barges, your feet rocking with the river's sway. The workers around you are sunburned, bare-chested, their muscles taut as ropes themselves. They row, they sing, they spit into the current, their eyes squinting against the glare. One man hands you a jug of beer, thick and cloudy, more like liquid bread than drink. You take a sip, cough, and decide ancient workers were either tougher or less picky than you. Maybe both. As the barge glides, you pass temples along the riverbanks, their pylons carved with images of gods and pharaohs. You realize the stones aren't just moving through space, they're moving through ritual. Every journey is part offering, part performance. The Nile itself is a stage, and these blocks are actors in a cosmic drama. Then the wind shifts, carrying the smell of mud and lotus, and you hear a question whispering in your ear. How did they unload all this? At Giza's harbor, a bustling hub now buried under centuries of sand, the barges dock. Ramps stretch down, sleds are pulled off, and teams once again take up their ropes. The blocks groan as they're dragged across causeways, up toward the plateau. The air is full of shouts, the beat of drums, the squeal of wood against stone. It's chaos, but it's controlled chaos. Somewhere in the mess, scribes sit cross-legged with rolls of papyrus, tallying each block, marking names, recording quotas. Nothing escapes the bureaucracy of Egypt. If you thought your boss was strict about timesheets, imagine explaining to Khufu why you lost track of a 6-ton block. Sorry, it rolled into the Nile is not gonna fly. The sun dips lower as the stone you've been following reaches the base of the pyramid. Workers collapse in the dust, sweat streaking their bodies. One man kisses the ground in relief, another just gulps beer like it's salvation. And the block, silent and heavy, just waits. Tomorrow it will be dragged up a ramp, fitted into place, another tooth in the jaw of eternity. The wind shifts again, carrying sand into your hair. You look back toward the river, still busy with barges, still glittering with light. The whole landscape feels like a machine. Quarries feeding sledges, sledges feeding boats, boats feeding ramps, ramps feeding the pyramid. You realize you're standing inside the gears of history, and the machine doesn't stop. Not for you, not for anyone. The block you followed rests at the pyramid's foot like a dog waiting for command, and now the real question rises in your mind. How in the world did they get these things up there? You crane your neck toward the slope of stone, a mountain under construction, and you realize the ground plan doesn't explain the vertical climb. You're not the first to puzzle over this. Whole generations of scholars, engineers, and amateur tinkerers with way too much free time have argued about ramps. Ramps straight, ramps zigzag, ramps corkscrewing around the structure like a giant stone parking garage. Tonight, you're about to wander through those theories one by one, as if the sand itself whispers blueprints in your ear. The simplest image is a straight causeway, stretching out from the plateau like a massive tongue of earth. You picture it, a broad dirt ramp, rising gently but stretching for miles, wide enough to handle teams of men and sledges. The advantage is obvious: smooth incline, straightforward hauling. The problem? You'd need to bury half the desert under rubble just to build it. By the time you reach the upper courses of the pyramid, your ramp is longer than the Nile is wide. And frankly, the idea of dismantling that ramp afterward feels like the worst cleanup job in history. Imagine being on the crew assigned to shovel away millions of tons of dirt, just so Pharaoh's view isn't ruined. Hey boss, can't we just leave it? Maybe call it a scenic hill? No chance. So another theory snakes into your head: the zigzag ramp. Instead of one impossible stretch, smaller ramps climb up the sides and switchbacks, like hiking trails in the Rockies. The teams drag blocks up one leg, turn, pull again, turn again, slow but feasible. You can almost see it, the pyramid dressed in temporary ribbons of earth, crisscrossing its flanks. The drawback? Corners. Every time a block has to pivot, someone curses, ropes strain, and accidents happen. And the marks such a ramp would leave should still be there. Yet the stones we see today don't carry those scars. Then there's the spiraling ramp, a favorite among armchair theorists. Picture a giant stone corkscrew wrapping the pyramid, blocks inching upward like ants in a spiral. Ingenious, yes, but also claustrophobic. How would you keep track of straight lines and sharp edges if half the monument is hidden behind dirt coils? Egyptians were obsessed with precision. These sides are aligned within fractions of a degree to true north. Building blind under a spiral cloak seems unlikely, unless they had measuring tricks we haven't rediscovered yet. As you sift through these ideas, your feet crunch over the sand, and you stumble upon another possibility: the internal ramp. Imagine hallways carved inside the body of the pyramid itself, blocks traveling upward through its guts like blood through arteries. Some modern engineers swear by it, pointing to odd notches and voids detected inside. If true, then the pyramid wasn't just a tomb, but also a colossal machine, building itself from the inside out. Creepy? Yes. Brilliant? Absolutely. You pause, wipe grit from your eyes, and chuckle at a passing thought. Maybe the Egyptians solved this the way we solve most impossible tasks, by throwing more people at it. Thousands pulling in unison, guided by overseers with voices like thunder, inching block after block up temporary scaffolds that left no trace once cleared away. A brute force ballet, sweaty and relentless. Sometimes the simplest answer doesn't need an elegant blueprint. But as your gaze returns to the half-built slope, you hear echoes of arguments still alive today. Straight ramps are impossible. Spirals make no sense. Internal passages explain everything. Even now, in labs and lecture halls, scholars sketch diagrams on napkins, run simulations on computers, or dig trenches in hopes of one scrap of evidence. The mystery refuses to settle, like a cat that won't sit where you tell it to. Meanwhile, under the blazing sun of Khufu's time, no one paused to debate. They simply hauled. Stone by stone, ramp or no ramp, the pyramid climbed into the sky. What matters to you, standing here, is not the exact slope of dirt, but the sheer audacity of the attempt. You feel your lungs tighten as you imagine being part of the crew. Rope biting your palm, sandals slipping, muscles screaming. You'd last about 10 minutes before faking an injury and asking for reassignment to bread duty. The wind shifts, and sand hisses across the surface like a whisper. The ramps are gone, but the dream remains. And you, perched on the edge of theory and dust, can't help but grin. The pyramid may never confess its construction secrets, but it keeps you awake, curious, chasing blueprints in the dark. You duck your head low and step into shadow, leaving behind the glare of the desert. The temperature drops instantly, the way it does when you walk into a cool stone basement on a hot July afternoon. Your skin prickles with relief, but the air here is heavy, muffled. You're inside the Great Pyramid, and suddenly the outside chaos of sledges and ramps feels like a distant dream. The first thing you notice is how narrow everything feels. The passage slopes downward at an awkward angle, just wide enough for one person to hunch and shuffle. Your knees ache, your palms brush gritty stone, and you can't help but imagine the countless workers who squeezed through this same path, torches flickering in their hands. Some passages are so low you nearly crawl, like the pyramid is testing your patience before letting you glimpse its heart. Soon you find yourself in the so-called descending passage, pointing like an arrow straight toward the bowels of the earth. It's lined with limestone blocks fitted so snugly you could slide a hair between them, if you had a hair left that wasn't already plastered to your forehead with sweat. This passage leads to an unfinished chamber, a hollow pit of rough stone. Some think it was abandoned mid-construction, others that it served as a symbolic underworld. Whatever its purpose, you can feel the weight of millions of tons pressing above your head. It's the kind of sensation that makes you want to keep moving fast. Climbing back up, you angle into the ascending passage, narrower still, like squeezing through the neck of a bottle. Your shoulders scrape, your thighs burn, but eventually you burst into a space that takes your breath away, the Grand Gallery. Here, the ceiling soars high, a vaulted corridor with corbelled stone layers stacked like the steps of a giant staircase. It feels almost cathedral-like, echoing with your every breath. You imagine workers dragging blocks up wooden sledges in this space, their cries bouncing off the walls, torches casting jagged shadows that make the gallery look alive. Some historians argue this gallery was part of the building mechanism itself, like a ramp hidden within the pyramid's body. Others insist it was purely ceremonial. The truth, still contested. From the gallery, you climb toward the king's chamber. The air grows stiller, thicker, as if the pyramid is holding its breath. When you enter, the chamber's stark simplicity is striking. A rectangular room of massive granite blocks, each quarried from Aswan, hundreds of miles upriver. The ceiling is flat, supported not by chance but by cunning engineering. Above, 5 layers of relieving chambers distribute the crushing weight so the ceiling doesn't collapse. Think of it as history's earliest stress relief hack. Without it, the granite roof would have shattered centuries ago. Standing here, you realize you're inside a space designed to last forever, and so far, it's succeeding. At the far end sits the sarcophagus, a battered granite box, lid long gone. Once, it may have held the body of Khufu himself, though his remains vanished long ago, lost to tomb robbers, hidden elsewhere, or never placed here to begin with. The emptiness of that box whispers a mystery as loud as any debate about ramps. You lean closer, run your fingers across its rough edges, and the granite feels colder than the air, as if it's hoarding the chill of centuries. Just when you think you've seen the highlight, you remember there's more. The Queen's chamber lies below, smaller, plainer, yet no less intriguing. Two narrow shafts branch off its walls, angling upward toward the pyramid's exterior. Were they meant for ventilation? For symbolic passageways of the soul, guiding it toward the stars? The shafts don't even reach the outside, they stop mysteriously short. Some researchers think they once aligned with specific constellations, like Orion's Belt or Sirius. Others shrug and admit we just don't know. And then, hidden deeper still, lies the subterranean chamber. Rough, unfinished, hacked directly into the bedrock beneath the pyramid. It feels raw compared to the polished perfection above. It's a ghostly space, its floor uneven, walls scarred with tool marks. Some say it was abandoned because of groundwater seeping in. Others believe it was symbolic, representing the underworld. You crouch there in the dust and feel the pyramid pressing down from above, like being buried alive in someone else's afterlife blueprint. As you wander through these halls, a thought nags at you. This isn't just architecture. It's philosophy in stone. Every chamber, every passage embodies Egyptian ideas about death, rebirth, eternity. The pyramid isn't only a tomb. It's a machine for the soul, a cosmic elevator pointing toward the stars. And yet, its corridors remain frustratingly silent. No inscriptions, no instructions carved for you to follow. Unlike the Valley of the Kings, where walls shout stories in hieroglyphs, Khufu's pyramid keeps its mouth shut. That silence may be the greatest mystery of all. Did Khufu want secrecy? Was writing forbidden here? Or have we simply not found the hidden spaces yet? Modern technology, lasers, muon scans, ground-penetrating radar, continues to reveal voids and anomalies tucked deep inside, like unopened doors in a locked house. Even now, the pyramid hasn't given up all its secrets. You press your palm to the cool stone one last time, and in the quiet you imagine you hear it hum. Maybe it's the blood rushing in your ears, maybe it's the acoustics of the chamber, but for a moment, it feels like the pyramid itself is breathing. And you, just a fleeting guest in its eternal silence, step back into the torchlit passage, wondering if anyone will ever know the whole truth of what lies within. You step back out into the sunlight, blinking as if you've been in a cinema for too long, your eyes adjusting slowly from the pyramid's dim silence to the relentless glow of Giza's midday. Dust hangs in the air, golden and hot, and you notice something beyond the towering stones. A scatter of low mud brick walls, pottery shards, and pathways that crisscross like veins. This is no temple, no tomb. It's the worker village, the hidden heartbeat of the pyramid. Without these people, all those blocks of limestone would still be scattered along the Nile's banks. You wander into the village and instantly catch the smell. Bread baking in clay ovens, smoky fires fed with palm fronds, a faint sour tang of beer brewing in giant ceramic jars. Your stomach growls, even though you know this is the kind of ancient brew that would probably taste like warm vinegar crossed with oatmeal. Yet to the pyramid builders, it was liquid gold. Calories, hydration, and maybe just enough buzz to make hauling 40-ton stones seem like a good idea. Archaeologists have found vats so big you could bathe in them, though nobody recommends mixing hygiene and barley mash. The village buzzes with life. Children chase each other barefoot through narrow lanes, their laughter mingling with the bray of donkeys. Women knead dough, weaving reeds into baskets, gossiping the way people always have about neighbors who borrowed too much barley and never paid it back. The men, when not dragging stones or chiseling blocks, sharpen copper tools, patch sandals, or collapse in the shade to nurse aching backs. And you, walking through it all, realize this is less a temporary camp and more like a bustling little city. One surprise greets you, a cemetery nearby. Not the grand, gilded kind reserved for pharaohs, but modest graves for workers themselves. Their skeletons tell a story more honest than any inscription. Worn spines, healed fractures, arthritis in knees and shoulders. These weren't faceless slaves whipped into submission. They were skilled laborers, cared for enough that even broken bones were set properly, allowing them to return to work. Some were buried with small offerings: bread, beer, beads, as if their neighbors wanted to ensure they didn't go hungry in the afterlife. That small detail hits you harder than the massive pyramid. It proves community, respect, even affection. Archaeologists unearthed bakeries here that could pump out thousands of loaves daily. Imagine the logistics. Feeding a workforce of perhaps 20,000 hungry mouths, each consuming rations that would make a modern buffet look stingy. The menu wasn't glamorous, but it was consistent. Bread, beer, onions, dried fish, maybe dates if you were lucky. Not a Michelin star spread, but enough fuel to turn human bodies into engines of stone hauling. And while you chew on that mental image, you can't help but laugh at the thought. Ancient carbs built the Great Pyramid. Forget protein shakes. What you really needed was a 5-loaf-a-day diet plan. There's evidence, too, of workshops for copper chisels, flint blades, wooden sledges, rope twisting. The pyramid might look eternal, but it was built with tools humble enough to make a modern hardware store laugh. And yet, in their hands, those tools carved history. You picture a carpenter sanding a sled's surface smooth with desert sand, murmuring complaints about splinters, while his workmate oils the wood to keep it from cracking. Another team hammers copper chisels until the tips blunt, then reheats and reshapes them at a small furnace. Repetition, endless and unglamorous, but every stroke, every strike mattered. What's most striking, though, is the rhythm of life here. Work wasn't endless toil. It came in shifts. Farmers, when the Nile flooded their fields, had months where crops couldn't be tended. So they rotated into pyramid duty, trading plows for ropes, earning food and favor in return. Then, when waters receded, they returned to their farms, leaving behind another set of shoulders to carry the load. It's a system cleverer than any time clock, perfectly syncing human labor with the Nile's eternal pulse. Yet even here, mysteries linger. Why was the village abandoned so suddenly? Some ruins look as though people simply packed up and left, pots still in place, ovens cold but intact. Did construction finish and the workforce scatter home? Or did something disrupt the flow, famine, politics, disease? The answer drifts like desert sand, half covered, half revealed, never certain. As you sit on a fallen mud brick wall, the breeze carrying the scent of ash and bread. You realize the pyramid isn't just Khufu's monument. It's theirs too. Every block, every inch of polished limestone was touched by hands that cooked, hammered, laughed, and cried right here in this village. The pharaoh's name may dominate the history books, but without these workers, these ordinary, extraordinary people, the desert would hold no pyramid at all. And you smile because somewhere in the background a child shouts for his friend, a dog barks, and for just a moment you can almost believe you're sitting in the middle of a neighborhood barbecue, only this one built the last ancient wonder still standing. You dust your hands against your thighs as if the mud brick from the workers' village might stick, and your gaze shifts to the horizon where long roads fade toward the Nile. That's when it hits you. The pyramid wasn't just built here, it was fed here, supplied here, organized here. And somehow, in a desert with no Wi-Fi, no forklifts, and no delivery apps, the Egyptians managed a logistical ballet that would make a modern supply chain manager cry with envy. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. Barges gliding along the Nile, laden with limestone from Tura, granite from Aswan, cedar from Lebanon. The river itself becomes a conveyor belt, ferrying goods day and night. On shore, overseers bark orders, scribes tally numbers on papyrus, and squads of workers unload crates. You can almost hear the squelch of wet ropes, the thud of wood planks, the curses when someone slips and drops a bundle of onions into the river. The whole thing feels oddly familiar, like an airport baggage claim, except instead of lost suitcases, you're worried about misplacing 30 tons of granite. And oh, the food. We're talking rations on a scale that boggles the mind. Thousands of loaves of bread per day, beer barrels stacked like modern soda cans, and cattle driven in from the delta to be slaughtered in an endless rotation. Archaeologists have uncovered animal bones, cattle, sheep, goats, that prove workers ate meat far more regularly than the average Egyptian farmer. In fact, being on pyramid duty might have been the closest thing to a premium job package. You break your back hauling stones, but you also get steak night twice a week. Not bad for the old kingdom. The logistics didn't stop at food. Imagine the sheer volume of tools. Copper chisels wearing down after just a few days, ropes fraying, sledges splintering. Workshops hummed non-stop to keep up with demand, a supply line as essential as bread and beer. It's almost like watching a modern construction site, except the hardware store is staffed by potters, carpenters, and smiths who measure time not in hours but in the rising and falling of the Nile. Now consider the paperwork. Yes, paperwork. Archaeologists have found fragments of records, tallies of bread loaves distributed, beer jars counted, stone deliveries noted. These weren't random scribbles. They were precise accounts, evidence of a bureaucracy humming as steadily as any office printer. Somewhere, a scribe sat cross-legged with a reed pen, muttering about how many men got extra beer today because someone dragged a particularly stubborn block. And you can't help but laugh. Even 4,500 years ago, someone was already complaining about too much paperwork. Of course, the system wasn't flawless. A shipment delayed by low Nile water, a herd lost to desert raiders, a batch of bread scorched beyond edible, it all added chaos. You can imagine the stress on overseers trying to keep thousands fed and equipped. Forget yelling about late Amazon packages. Here, a delay might stall an entire section of pyramid. The stakes were monumental, literally. And yet, somehow, it worked. The evidence shows a supply machine so efficient that blocks weighing more than your car arrived on site, sledges and ropes ready, workers fueled and equipped, day after day, for decades. It's the kind of coordination that makes you rethink what ancient really means. These weren't bumbling primitives. They were masters of logistics, running a human engine with astonishing precision. But here's the twist. For all this organization, debates still rage. Were the workers' volunteers fulfilling a civic duty, or were they conscripts compelled by the state? Did they feel pride, or did they grumble every night about sore backs and sand in places sand should never go? Some scholars suggest a mix, people drawn by food, pay, or prestige, plus those nudged, let's say enthusiastically encouraged by officials. The truth, as always, probably lives in the gray space between. As you stand near the phantom streets of the workers' village, you picture the endless caravans of donkeys, oxen, barges, and men. It's almost funny. We moderns pride ourselves on supply chains with barcodes and tracking numbers, yet a hiccup in shipping still leaves us short on avocados or video game consoles. Meanwhile, Khufu's overseers kept their entire desert machine running with reed pens, muscle, and grit. If you don't feel humbled by that, you might need to imagine yourself trying to feed 20,000 sweaty stone haulers with nothing but clay ovens and beer jars. The breeze shifts, carrying the scent of baked earth and something sweet. You think dates, though it could just be imagination. In that moment, you realize the pyramid isn't just a monument to stone. It's a monument to logistics. A 146-meter-tall receipt proving that ancient Egypt knew how to keep its people supplied, its stones moving, and its dream alive. And as the sun dips, you chuckle softly, because if anyone ever asks who built the pyramid, the answer is clear. The cooks, the brewers, the boatmen, the scribes, the herdsmen. Without them, Khufu's dream is just a pile of idle limestone waiting for someone to call in a delivery. You pause at the edge of the village ruins, your eyes drawn back toward the Great Pyramid. The sun is sinking lower now, throwing long shadows that stretch like black ribbons across the plateau. The structure looms not just as stone, but as a beacon of belief, a frozen prayer carved into the horizon. And you begin to sense that the pyramid was never only about power or logistics, or even the vanity of kings. It was about religion, about aligning human sweat with the eternal heartbeat of the cosmos. Imagine being an Egyptian 4.5 millennia ago. The Nile rises and falls, crops bloom and die. The sun slips below the horizon only to return each morning in a blaze of rebirth. To you, all of it is part of a sacred rhythm, a cosmic order called Ma'at. The pyramid isn't a pile of limestone. It's a stake in the ground saying, "We belong to that rhythm, we keep it alive." Each block placed is both engineering and ritual. Look closer and you notice how the Great Pyramid is aligned. Not kinda close or roughly facing north. No, it is aligned so precisely to the cardinal points that even modern surveyors with GPS would be impressed. North, south, east, west, the pyramid nails it. And if you tilt your gaze upward, you realize why. The stars. Egyptians looked to the night sky as a map of eternity, a place where gods sailed on celestial boats. For them, the pyramid mirrored heaven, locking earth to sky like a gigantic anchor of faith. Step into the Pharaoh's burial chamber in your mind. The walls are bare, no painted murals like later tombs, but the geometry speaks louder than paint. The shafts from the king's chamber point to Orion's belt and Sirius, stars tied to Osiris and rebirth. It's as though Khufu wanted a direct hotline to the gods, a cosmic air duct for his soul to slip through. And you can almost imagine him chuckling, thinking, why settle for a priest's prayers when I can build a stone rocket aimed at the afterlife? Religion seeps into the very labor of construction. Workers didn't just haul blocks, they performed acts of devotion. Each pull on a rope echoed the myth of helping Ra's sun boat across the sky. Each chiseled groove was a whisper of order against chaos. You can picture an overseer telling exhausted men, "One more block, and the gods smile on your children." It's motivational speech meets cosmic insurance policy. Here's a curious detail. The pyramid's very shape, the sloping sides, was thought to echo the rays of the sun, a ramp for the king's soul to climb to the heavens. Some scholars even note how the Benben stone, a sacred emblem of creation, is reflected in the pyramid's form. So when you stare at that monumental geometry, you're not just seeing architecture. You're seeing a stairway, a flashlight, and a god's first spark, all compressed into limestone. And yet, historians still argue. Was the pyramid a literal machine for resurrection, or a symbolic show of the pharaoh's devotion? Some say it was both, a cosmic stage set where religion and politics performed the same play. Because honestly, when your ruler convinces you that dragging a multi-ton stone block ensures the sun rises tomorrow, you're probably going to drag that stone. Now you catch yourself smiling. It's a little funny, isn't it? In our world, we align houses with good Wi-Fi signals or sunlight for solar panels. They aligned a mountain of stone to Orion's belt so their king's soul wouldn't miss the afterlife express. Priorities may have shifted, but the need to tie our fragile lives to something larger has never gone away. The desert air cools, and a breeze whispers across the plateau. You sense what those ancient workers must have felt, a mixed with duty, belief braided with sweat. The pyramid, from this angle, glows faintly in the dying light, half temple, half telescope, always reaching upward. And you realize that to understand who built it, you can't ignore the gods. Because without faith, no bread, no beer, no whip of command could have kept so many hands pulling in the same direction for so many years. You stand a little longer, staring at the sharp edge of stone cutting against the soft twilight sky. And for a fleeting moment, you think you understand why this monument endures. It wasn't just meant to last forever, it was meant to hold forever inside its very shape. You turn your back to the Great Pyramid for a moment, and there it is, the Sphinx. A shape half buried, half revealed, crouching low against the desert floor like some patient animal waiting for eternity to blink first. The face is worn, the nose long gone, but the presence? Oh, it still pounces on you, silent and heavy, as though it's been watching since the dawn of time. You step closer, feeling oddly like you've walked into someone else's dream. Now, here's the strange thing. No one actually agrees on who built it. Most Egyptologists say it was carved during Khafu's reign, Khufu's son, somewhere around 2500 BCE. They see the resemblance between its face and statues of Khafu, broad jaw, regal calm. It fits neatly like a family photo where dad gets the pyramid and son gets the guardian statue. But then the mystery creeps in. Some argue the weathering on the Sphinx's body shows water erosion, not wind. That could push its creation back thousands of years earlier, into a time when Egypt's climate was wetter. You tilt your head, squinting at the creature's leonine body. It's stretched out unnaturally long, as though the carvers kept extending it when they realized their proportions were off. Or maybe they were adjusting to the bedrock they were carving into. Unlike the pyramid, which was built block by block, the Sphinx was chiseled straight out of the living limestone plateau. Imagine the sound of chisels ringing, dust rising in clouds, whole gangs of masons sweating over paws the size of houses. The statue wasn't assembled. It was excavated, revealed, pulled out of stone like a giant fossil of imagination. And then there's the question of its purpose. Guardian of the necropolis? Monument to Khafre's power? A fusion of lion and king meant to embody solar strength? The Sphinx never comes with instructions. That's part of its charm. You can almost laugh at how modern historians get into heated debates. PowerPoint presentations, laser scans, shouting over coffee, while the Sphinx just sits there, stone lips sealed, smug in its silence. As you walk closer in your mind's eye, picture the original paint. Yes, paint. The Sphinx wasn't always sandy beige. Once, it blazed with red on the face, blue on the headdress, yellow across the body. Can you imagine it? A massive Technicolor guardian gleaming in the sun, like a surreal billboard for pharaonic authority. The centuries have stripped it down to its bones, but in its youth, it was gaudy, loud, and impossible to ignore. You chuckle at another detail. The Sphinx has a tail. Tucked along its right flank, curling like a cat's, a reminder that despite its royal headdress, this creature was meant to be animal too. An eternal lion basking in stone, forever watching the rising sun. Because yes, the Sphinx faces due east, locked on the horizon where the sun emerges every morning. Every dawn, for thousands of years, the first light of Ra touches its face. You can almost feel the heat of it now, that cosmic alarm clock ringing without fail. Still, questions linger. Did Khafre commission it as a divine guardian? Did earlier rulers begin carving only for Khafre to claim it? Or dare we say it, was it much older, a relic inherited from a forgotten civilization? Scholars argue evidence bends, but the Sphinx says nothing. That's its greatest trick, holding history hostage with silence. And yet, you can't help but smile. Because as much as people obsess over its missing nose, or the mysteries of its age, the Sphinx is already doing its job. It's making you feel small, making you wonder, making you lean into the silence of the desert. That's the real magic. A statue that forces you to ask questions instead of handing you answers. The wind kicks up sand, brushing across the Sphinx's flank, soft as a sigh. You hear the rustle and imagine it whispering secrets, secrets you'll never quite catch. And maybe that's the point. The pyramid tells you about power, logistics, and faith. The Sphinx? It just stares eternal, daring you to guess. You linger at the pause of the Sphinx, but soon your attention drifts to a question that nags harder than the desert wind in your ears. How did they actually build all of this? It's one thing to say, tens of thousands of workers or decades of labor. It's another to picture the actual tools, the clank of copper against stone, the squeak of sledges sliding over sand. You're not satisfied with a headline answer. You want to hear the rhythm of it, feel the blisters forming, taste the grit between your teeth. Let's start with copper. No iron, no steel, those luxuries came later. The Egyptians used copper chisels and saws, sometimes hardened with a touch of arsenic. Against soft limestone, they worked fine. Against the harder granite, quarried from Aswan 500 miles upriver? Oh, that was another story. For that, they used pounding stones made of dolerite, each weighing several pounds, swung endlessly until the granite cracked and yielded blocks. Imagine that job, hours of swinging a rock against another rock under the sun. Talk about commitment or masochism. Then there were ropes, thick twisted papyrus or palm fiber cords, and sledges, those wooden runners that hauled blocks across the sand. But how do you drag multi-ton stones without snapping your spine? Here comes the trick: water. Archaeologists found wall paintings showing workers pouring water in front of sledges. Wetting the sand reduces friction, making the blocks glide rather than grind. Is genius really a Bronze Age life hack? You picture a foreman yelling, "More water! This pyramid isn't going to slide itself." Levers, too, made their entrance. Wooden beams wedged under blocks, pried upward inch by inch. It's not glamorous, but it works. Ramps? Oh, ramps are the real hot topic. Straight ramps, zigzag ramps, spiral ramps around the pyramid's core. Each theory has fans, and each is hotly debated. The truth might be a mix, evolving as the pyramid rose higher. One thing's certain: ramps were massive, requiring more material than the pyramid itself, which makes you wonder if they tore them down after construction, recycling mud brick and rubble for later projects. Efficient, but it leaves the archaeologists arguing centuries later. Picture the soundtrack of it all. Hundreds of chisels tapping, hammers thudding, sledges creaking, overseers barking. Maybe a rhythm develops like music. Some workers singing chants to keep pace, others cursing under their breath. And somewhere in the background, priests murmuring prayers, because even chiseling granite needed divine approval. The air thick with dust, sweat, and that metallic tang of copper tools wearing down too fast. Here's a quirky little fact. Experiments in modern times showed that hauling a multi-ton block with a team of 20 to 30 people is actually doable, if you've got the right system. Not easy, but possible. Multiply that by thousands of blocks and years of effort, and suddenly the impossible seems merely exhausting. It doesn't take aliens, just coordination, grit, and a lot of bread and beer. You run your hand mentally over the grooves left by those tools, the faint scratches still visible on stone. They are like signatures of forgotten laborers, fingerprints etched into eternity. Each mark whispers, "A real human stood here, with aching arms, swinging copper against limestone, believing his sweat somehow mattered in the grand scheme." And of course, scholars still bicker. Did they use internal ramps hidden inside the pyramid? Did they lever blocks up step by step? Was there a genius engineering trick lost to time? The debates rage on, fueled by coffee and ego. Meanwhile, the pyramid just sits there, smug, as if to say, "Figure it out if you can." You chuckle softly. In your world, you complain when your IKEA bookshelf requires an Allen key. They built a 6 million ton limestone mountain with copper chisels and rope. Perspective, right? As the desert twilight deepens, you picture the tools set aside for the night, the sledges resting in sand, the ramps stretching into the shadows. A silence falls, but in your mind, you still hear the echoes. The clangs, the chants, the relentless scraping of copper on stone. The pyramid grows taller block by block, and you realize you're beginning to see the shape of human determination itself. You pull back from the clamor of chisels and sledges, and instead you let yourself drift into the lives of the workers themselves, the men and women who actually carved, hauled, cooked, and bandaged. Because a pyramid isn't just a monument to stone. It's a monument to people. You can almost hear their laughter in the night, smell their stews simmering, feel the tired weight in their bones as they lay down after a long day. Forget the old Hollywood image of slaves whipped under the sun. The truth is far more interesting. Archaeological digs around the Giza Plateau uncovered whole worker villages, rows of dormitories, bakeries with bread still hardened to stone, breweries with vats for beer, even cemeteries where bones show signs of healed injuries. These were not expendable slaves. They were skilled laborers fed and cared for. Many were farmers working seasonally, when the Nile's floodwaters made fields too soggy for crops. Instead of farming, they built. And they were paid in bread, beer, and rations that would make even modern interns jealous. You smile at the thought, bread and beer as currency. Imagine your paycheck as a six-pack and a basket of loaves. Sounds ridiculous, but in that world it was survival, community, fuel for lifting a block that weighed as much as your car. A worker might drink up to 4 liters of beer a day. Not the IPA, but a thick, porridge-like brew, nutritious and filling. You can almost feel the buzz of it, a haze that makes moving a giant block seem, well, maybe not fun, but at least less painful. The villages also had butchers, bakers, and brewers supplying a workforce of thousands. Bones of cattle and sheep found there suggest these workers weren't living on scraps. They ate meat regularly, a sign of valued status. The cemeteries tell another story. Skeletons with healed fractures, meaning injured workers received medical care and lived on. You picture a healer with linen bandages and honey salves, tending to wounds, muttering prayers to Sekhmet for strength. Not exactly a corporate health plan, but still impressive for 4,500 years ago. At night, after work, the workers gathered. Some carved graffiti on nearby stones, scribbles of their crew names like the Friends of Khufu or the Drunkards of Menkaure. You grin. It's like ancient construction gangs leaving behind their signatures, inside jokes immortalized in hieroglyphs. Imagine a block arriving with Team RA Forever scratched onto it. Even then, people couldn't resist tagging their work. And the humor shows. One ostrakhan, bits of pottery used as scratch paper, records, little jokes, doodles, even caricatures of supervisors with oversized ears or bellies. You can almost hear the snickers of tired men poking fun at their boss. Not so different from office memes today. Apparently, sarcasm has been humanity's true eternal art form. But there's another side. Imagine waking before dawn, body aching, trudging to the ramps under the rising sun. Dust clings to your sweat, sand stings your eyes. You lean into the ropes, shoulder burning, while overseers shout. Day after day, year after year. The pyramid rises, but so do the blisters and coughs. Some bones found in the workers' cemetery show arthritis, spinal stress, even crushed limbs. These were proud workers, yes, but they paid dearly with their bodies. Still, you sense their pride. They weren't building for some abstract future. They believed they were serving the gods, securing eternal life for their king, and by extension, protecting Egypt itself. Their sweat wasn't just labor, it was devotion. You sigh softly, feeling the weight of it. In your world, you leave reviews for food delivery apps. In theirs, you carved eternity into stone. And maybe, just maybe, you start to feel guilty for complaining when your Wi-Fi is slow. The stars begin to prick the sky above your imagination of Giza. The workers rest in their dorms, bellies full of bread and beer, laughter fading as sleep takes over. Tomorrow, they'll rise again, drag more blocks, and inch closer to immortality. And you? You're left marveling at how much humanity hasn't changed. Still tired, still joking, still dreaming of leaving something behind. You tilt your gaze upward from the workers' campfires toward the plateau where the Pharaoh's palace would have loomed. For all the sweat and dust, this project wasn't just about muscles, it was about vision. Khufu, the pharaoh at the heart of this tale, had a dream bigger than any man's lifetime. And you, standing in his shadow, can almost feel the weight of that dream pressing down as heavily as any limestone block. Pharaoh wasn't merely a king. He was divine, or at least that's what everyone believed, including himself. A living god on earth, the mediator between people and the celestial. To him, this pyramid wasn't vanity. It was destiny, a cosmic alignment. By building a stairway of stone that touched the heavens, he was ensuring his own eternal journey with Ra, the sun god. In other words, this was less, "Look at me, I'm awesome," and more, "Help me hitchhike to eternity, thanks." You imagine Khufu addressing his architects, his priests gathered close, scribes recording his words in careful strokes. He speaks not of ramps and chisels, but of eternity. He paints a vision of a structure so grand it will outlast generations, a beacon in the desert pointing toward the stars. His voice is calm, but you can sense the pressure. Fail him, and you don't just disappoint a king, you disappoint the cosmos. No pressure, right? And those architects, standing with papyrus scrolls, nod like they totally understand how to make a mountain out of limestone. Inside, maybe they're panicking. Yes, sire. A pyramid that never crumbles, perfectly aligned to the stars. Absolutely doable, no problem. Then later, when Khufu isn't listening, do you have any idea how many rocks that is? But vision has a way of bending reality. Khufu's determination galvanized thousands. He wasn't just building for himself, he was binding his people to a shared story. By working on the pyramid, they weren't just laborers. They were actors in a cosmic drama. Even the humblest rope puller could believe he had a hand in securing Egypt's eternal order. Here's a strange twist. While Khufu is remembered today mostly as the man behind the Great Pyramid, in his time, his reputation wasn't exactly glowing. Later texts painted him as a harsh ruler, someone who taxed heavily and demanded loyalty to the point of cruelty. Maybe that's propaganda from rival dynasties, or maybe he really was a tough boss. Either way, the pyramid stands while his character remains a question mark. You picture him walking the plateau at dusk, robes trailing, watching the ramps stretch toward the sky. He sees not dust and exhaustion but destiny unfolding. For him, every stone is a prayer, every block an immortal heartbeat. His architects bow, his priests chant, his guards stand stiff and silent. Meanwhile, the workers below are probably joking about how many beers it will take to move the next block. Two visions, side by side, the cosmic and the earthly, both necessary to make it real. And as you stand there, in this imagined night of 4,500 years ago, you feel caught between them. On one hand, the sheer audacity of Khufu's dream. It's ridiculous, impossible, absurd. On the other, it's beautiful, transcendent, the kind of dream that gives human history its spine. Without dreamers like this, there'd be no wonders of the world, just a flat desert with nothing but silence. Of course, historians still argue. Was it Khufu himself who masterminded the design? Or his vizier Himiunu, often credited as the real genius? Did the pharaoh just nod and sign off, while his officials sweated over the details? The debate continues, sharp as ever. The pyramid, though, doesn't answer. It just sits there, enormous and smug, daring you to guess. You grin softly in the dark. Your world has skyscrapers with glass facades and Wi-Fi in the elevators. Khufu's world had none of that, and yet his dream still stands taller, still speaks louder. Maybe you think his vision wasn't about being remembered as nice or cruel. Maybe it was simply about being remembered at all. You turn your steps eastward, away from the looming pyramid, and there it is, half buried in the sands, its gaze locked on the horizon. The Sphinx. You almost shiver. Not because it's scary, but because it's so quiet, so patient, like it's been waiting thousands of years just for you to finally walk up and notice. Its lion's body stretches long, paws out front, while the human face stares eternally, expression calm, unreadable. You get the feeling it knows something you don't and will never tell. Nobody really knows when the Sphinx was carved. The traditional story ties it to Pharaoh Khafre, Khufu's son, who reigned just after him. That would make the Sphinx about 4,500 years old, sculpted directly out of the bedrock. But here's the twist. Some geologists swear the weathering patterns look older, maybe far older. Rain erosion, they whisper. Could it predate the pyramids entirely? You raise an eyebrow. Egyptians debating with geologists sounds like the ancient version of my data versus your vibes. You get closer in your mind, staring at the face. It's worn, broken nose gone. No, Napoleon's cannons didn't do it. Despite the rumor, local iconoclasts centuries earlier probably did. The beard? Fallen, fragments now in museums. But even stripped down, the Sphinx radiates authority. You feel like it's silently judging you for not finishing your laundry. Imagine the scene when it was fresh. Painted in vivid colors, red body, blue headdress, eyes outlined in black coal like a god come to life. Sunlight at dawn spilling across its stone mane. Priests approaching with incense, chanting hymns, bowing low. The Sphinx wasn't just a statue. It was a guardian, a cosmic sentinel watching over the Giza plateau. There's another mystery. Who does that face actually belong to? Was it Khafre, as most Egyptologists think? Or Khufu himself? Or maybe someone earlier whose name is now erased by time? Some fringe theories even suggest it was recarved. Perhaps the head was once that of a lion, later reshaped into a pharaoh's face when politics demanded it. You chuckle. Talk about the world's oldest makeover. Legends swirl around it, too. In the dream stele erected by Pharaoh Thutmose IV between the Sphinx's paws, the young prince tells of falling asleep in its shadow. The Sphinx appeared in his dream and promised him the throne if he cleared away the sands burying its body. Naturally, he woke up, grabbed a shovel, and started digging. Who wouldn't after that kind of career advice? And yet, for all the stories, the Sphinx keeps its secrets. Its body has been swallowed and uncovered by sand countless times over the millennia. Every generation rediscovers it, gasps, then tries to claim it. Napoleon's soldiers camped at its feet. Victorian tourists chipped off souvenirs. Even now, restorations fight against erosion, trying to keep its face from fading completely. You sit there in your imagination, at its paws, looking up into those eyes. There's a quiet hum in the air, like the desert itself is holding its breath. The pyramid behind you may shout with sheer size, but the Sphinx whispers. It whispers riddles, it whispers time. It whispers that humans will always chase mysteries they can never quite solve. The irony? While the pyramid tells you exactly who it belongs to, Khufu, the king immortalized in stone, the Sphinx refuses. Its builder remains a question mark, its origin blurred. And that's part of why it's irresistible. The Sphinx is not just a monument, it's a mirror. The more you stare, the more it stares back, reflecting your own questions, your own need for answers. You chuckle again softly. If the pyramid is like a massive history textbook, The Sphinx is the cryptic doodle in the margins that everyone keeps arguing about. And honestly, isn't that what keeps bedtime stories alive? Not the answers, but the mysteries that keep you wide-eyed, long after the lights go out. You crouch down now, sliding into the everyday world of the builders. Not the pharaohs with their star maps, not the Sphinx with its eternal riddles, but the people with sore backs, calloused hands, and a toolkit that would fit inside a backpack. You'd think something as massive as the Great Pyramid would need futuristic gadgets. Laser cutters, steel cranes, maybe at least a forklift or two. But nope. These folks built with copper chisels, stone hammers, wooden sledges, and a whole lot of patience. You pick up an imaginary copper chisel. It feels light, almost flimsy compared to modern tools. Against limestone, it holds up okay. Against granite? Forget it. Workers had to stop constantly to sharpen or replace them. You imagine the clang, clang, clang of chisel on stone echoing in the desert heat, and the guy swinging it muttering, "Really hope this pharaoh appreciates me." Then there were dolerite pounders, big, hard stones used to bash at granite until it cracked. Not delicate, not efficient, but effective if you had time and muscle. Imagine 20 guys taking turns whacking a block of granite like it's the world's worst piñata, and eventually, pieces break free. That's how obelisks were carved, how sarcophagi were shaped. Slow, brutal, noisy. Ropes were another secret weapon. Thick, twisted from papyrus or palm fibers, they held the sledges that dragged blocks. But ropes frayed, snapped, wore out. Someone's job, maybe yours in this imagination, was just making rope day after day. Twisting fibers in the sun, fingers raw. Glamorous? Not really. Essential? Absolutely. And then there were the sledges themselves. Wooden frames under the stones dragged across the sand. You remember that neat trick. Workers poured water in front of the sledges, wetting the sand just enough to reduce friction. Without that, the sand piled up in front of the runners, doubling the effort. With it, the blocks slid smoother. It's the ancient Egyptian equivalent of WD-40. You wander mentally into a quarry. Dust hangs thick in the air. Men chant rhythmically to coordinate their swings. Copper chisels bite, pounders thud, sledges creak. In the background, a foreman shouts encouragement, or maybe threats, depending on his mood. The work is monotonous but strangely hypnotic. You can almost taste the grit in your teeth. Here's a quirky detail. Archaeologists have found graffiti left behind by work gangs, scratched into blocks. Teams gave themselves nicknames like the Drunkards of Menkor or the Friends of Khufu. Imagine your construction crew today spray painting the coffee zombies on steel beams of a skyscraper. Same energy. These builders had pride in their teams, humor in the grind. And think about the scale. Every tool, every sled, every rope was handmade. No Amazon orders, no factory shipments. The pyramid wasn't just a monument of stone. It was also a monument of logistics. Somebody was in charge of counting chisels, repairing sledges, weaving endless coils of rope. Lose track and the whole operation slowed. Of course, scholars still debate the details. Did they use levers more than we think? Were copper saws with sand abrasives more important than pounders? Could wooden cranes have lifted blocks in tight spaces? There's no one blueprint left behind. No Pyramids for Dummies manual. Just scattered evidence and the results towering over the desert. You can't help but laugh a little. All our modern power tools, and sometimes you can barely assemble an IKEA bookshelf without tears. Yet these workers, with nothing but copper chisels and rope, stacked millions of stones into the most enduring monument on Earth. Humbling, isn't it? As you let the hammering and chanting fade in your mind, you realize these tools weren't just physical, they were social. They built not just stone structures, but a culture of persistence. Each chisel mark, each rope pull, whispered the same stubborn truth. Impossible things are possible if you chip away long enough. You drift now into the realm of incense smoke and chanting, where the thud of chisels gives way to the murmur of priests and the steady rhythm of ritual. Because to the builders, the pyramid wasn't just a giant pile of limestone. It was a staircase for the soul, a machine to keep the cosmos running smoothly. You pass into a temple courtyard, hot sun glaring down, and you feel that hush people get when they step into a church, mosque, or temple today. Columns rise like bundled reeds, walls painted with gods who loom larger than life. Ra, the sun, sails across the ceiling in golden arcs. Osiris watches with green skin and calm judgment. Hathor smiles, cow horn crown gleaming, promising music and love in the afterlife. Religion wasn't a side gig, it was the blueprint. The Great Pyramid was aligned so precisely to the cardinal points of the compass that even with modern tech, surveyors shake their heads. And why? Because it had to fit the order of Ma'at, the cosmic balance. You trip over that word in your mind, Ma'at. It's truth, justice, harmony, the thing holding everything together. Build a pyramid even a few degrees off, and it's like misaligning the gears of the universe. No pressure, right? Inside, narrow passageways weren't just tunnels, they were cosmic highways. The air shafts that shoot out from the king's chamber? Some scholars say they weren't for air at all, but for starlight. They point to Orion's belt and Sirius, guiding the pharaoh's soul toward eternity. You imagine lying on your back in the desert night, tracing those same stars, and realizing someone 4,500 years ago was doing the same, chisel in hand, aligning stone to sky. And then there's the Sphinx. You walk closer, sand brushing your ankles, and its gaze fixes on you. Half lion, half man, facing the rising sun. Some call it a guardian, others a riddle carved in stone. Was it Khafre's face? Was it older, carved long before his reign, reworked by later kings? Scholars still argue, sometimes heatedly, about its true origins. But in the hush of night, you hear what matters more. It was a sentinel of order, crouched against the chaos of the desert, reminding everyone that the pharaoh wasn't just a man. He was the axis between heaven and earth. There's humor, too. You imagine workers rolling their eyes when priests insisted the alignment had to be just so. Shifted a hair to the left. No, too much back again. Like trying to hang a picture frame straight while someone hovers behind you. Except here, the picture frame is 2.3 million blocks of stone. Still, for the Egyptians, these rituals gave meaning to the backbreaking labor. Every hammer swing echoed with the certainty that they weren't just building a tomb. They were securing the sunrise, locking in the Nile's flood, keeping the stars steady in their courses. You can almost hear a worker telling his kid, "I moved stones so Ra could rise tomorrow. Pretty cool, huh?" And when night falls over Giza and the desert cools, you realize this. The pyramid wasn't just stone against the sky. It was faith made visible, a geometry of devotion, a monument to the belief that the world itself could be stabilized if humans align themselves with the stars. The sand crunches under your feet as you draw closer to the Sphinx. that silent giant crouched like a watchful cat at the edge of Giza. Even now, half buried, weather-worn, its nose long gone, it radiates a strange gravity. You feel it staring, even though it has no pupils, like the desert itself borrowed a face and decided to keep it forever. It's massive, carved from a single outcrop of limestone, body stretching longer than a football field, paws stretched forward like it's waiting to pounce. And the head, human, but not just any human. Theories swirl like sandstorms. Was it Khafre, builder of the second pyramid? Was it Djedefre, his less-known brother? Or could it be older than them all, the remnant of some forgotten era? Archaeologists argue over chisel marks and erosion patterns the way your friends argue over which fast food chain has the best fries. No one agrees, but everyone's got a favorite. You tilt your head. The lion's body isn't random. In Egyptian thought, lions were guardians, ferocious protectors. Pair that with the human intelligence of a pharaoh's head, and you get a cosmic security system, wisdom riding on raw strength. Every traveler approaching from the east would see it, staring at the rising sun, and know, here lives a king who is part god, part man, and fully terrifying if you cross him. Then comes the mystery of age. Some scholars point to weathering on the body, saying the erosion looks like it came from heavy rainfall Egypt hasn't seen since long before the pyramids. That sparks theories of a civilization predating the pharaohs, a ghost culture lost to time. Others push back, saying no, wind and sand can do the job too. The debates flare up at conferences, voices rising, slideshows flashing, while the Sphinx just keeps lying there in the sand, unimpressed. Legends layered on thick. In the New Kingdom, Pharaoh Thutmose IV claimed the Sphinx spoke to him in a dream. Clear the sand from my body, it whispered, and I'll grant you kingship. He did, and lo and behold, he became pharaoh. He carved the dream steel between its paws to brag about it, like an ancient version of leaving a Yelp review. You run your hand along the imagined inscription, chuckling, because even in the Bronze Age, people knew how to market their personal brand. Yet, despite all this grandeur, you can't shake a sense of fragility. The Sphinx has been buried in sand for most of its life, as if the desert kept trying to reclaim it. Every time humans dig it out, wind and time gnaw at it again. You imagine ancient workers shoveling endlessly, muttering, "Didn't we clear this last week?" And still it endures, a riddle in limestone. The symbol matters more than the answers. Whether guardian, pharaoh, or mystery from before memory, the Sphinx ties together sky, sand, and stone. It reminds you that humans have always carved questions bigger than themselves, then stared at them in wonder for centuries. And so you stand, letting the silence stretch, realizing this statue is less about solving and more about feeling. Feeling awe, feeling small, feeling that deep shiver of mystery that makes bedtime stories last forever. The night breeze softens as you wander from the Sphinx back toward the pyramids, those colossal silhouettes cutting against the stars. Your footsteps slow because by now you understand you're not just passing monuments of stone, you're brushing past the very legacy of the pharaohs. Their power wasn't only carved into limestone, it seeped into stories, rituals, and even into how people still dream of immortality today. You imagine Khufu standing at the site before construction began, eyes narrowed at the horizon, thinking not just of his lifetime but of eternity. For him, the Great Pyramid wasn't vanity, it was strategy. If he could tie his soul to the stars, align his tomb with the heavens, then his kingship might outlast not just death, but time itself. And in a way, it did. You're here, thousands of years later, whispering his name. That's one serious long-term marketing campaign. Pharaohs didn't rule alone, of course. Their legacy was a team effort. Priests, scribes, artisans, farmers, stone haulers. Yet all of it was bound by one vision, that the pharaoh stood as the axis between the mortal and the divine. You think of it like a Wi-Fi router. If the pharaoh went down, the connection to the gods went out. And nobody wanted that. So every brick, every offering, every hymn was a way of boosting that signal. The legacy also has its shadows. Khufu's reputation, for instance, is debated. Some records praise him as a master ruler, while others paint him as a tyrant who demanded relentless labor. Which was true? Hard to say. Historians still bicker about it. Perhaps the truth sits somewhere in the middle, like any leader who built big, bold things, visionary to some, unbearable to others. But what matters more is what endured. The pyramids became eternal billboards of pharaoh power. Later kings built smaller, different kinds of monuments, but none could quite outshine those colossal triangles gleaming on the Giza plateau. It's like when one band drops a legendary debut album, everyone else has to live in its shadow. The legacy stretches beyond Egypt, too. Greek historians like Herodotus came wandering centuries later, scribbling down half-truths and tales. Tourists from Rome carved their names on stones, the ancient version of "I was here." Napoleon's soldiers camped in the shadows, wide-eyed. And now you, in your dim room, listening to this story, are part of that same chain of witnesses. The pharaohs wanted to be remembered forever, and congratulations to them, it worked. Yet, as you linger here, something gentler creeps into the story. You notice the quiet care with which workers buried small figurines, the careful hieroglyphs about everyday life. Pharaohs may have claimed divine glory, but their legacy includes these traces of human hands, warm, calloused, trembling in the torchlight. The grandeur was cosmic, but the people behind it were flesh and blood. So the legacy of pharaohs is not just pyramids. It's the reminder that human ambition, faith, and sweat can reach so high they seem to touch the stars. And at the same time, it's the reminder that greatness always rides on the shoulders of countless, often nameless, lives. As the wind swirls sand around your ankles, you feel the story soften, like an old song slowing down toward its final verse. The pharaohs built for eternity, but their true gift may be this feeling right now, that you can step outside your own small span of years and touch something endlessly bigger. Your sandals crunch into gravel, but this time it isn't the polished limestone causeways or temple floors. It's the remains of something far more human. Just beyond the pyramids, archaeologists uncovered a secret city of the builders, the workers' villages. Here, the true pulse of pyramid life beats quietly beneath the sand. You duck into the outlines of ancient mud brick walls. Once, these were homes filled with laughter, complaints, and the smell of baking bread. Archaeologists found bakeries here, massive ovens pumping out thousands of loaves a day. And not the sad, dry kind you forget in the back of your fridge. These loaves were soft, hearty, and enough to fuel a laborer hauling multi-ton blocks. Add beer, thick and nourishing like a liquid sandwich, and you've got the ancient equivalent of an energy drink subscription. What strikes you is the scale. This wasn't a ragtag camp of slaves whipped into exhaustion, as old Hollywood liked to picture. It was an organized, thriving settlement. Excavations turned up rows of dormitories, kitchens, workshops, even a kind of hospital. Broken bones were found healed, meaning workers received medical care and lived long enough to return to work. Imagine the foreman walking by, saying, "Rest up, buddy. We'll save your block-lifting shift for next month." You almost hear the chuckle. Some graffiti survives too. Scratched into stone were team names: Friends of Khufu, Drunkards of Menkor. You grin because some things never change. Give a group of people hard work and downtime, and they'll invent goofy squad names. Suddenly, the workers don't feel like faceless masses. They feel like coworkers you joke with at lunch, brag about your lifting record, and complain about your supervisor. And let's talk about numbers. Estimates suggest 20,000 to 30,000 workers rotated in shifts, not 100,000 slaves as once imagined. Farmers came during the Nile's flood season when fields were underwater and farming paused, trading their plows for chisels. They got food, shelter, even pride in contributing to something bigger than themselves. In their off-seasons, they returned home, telling stories of how their hands shaped eternity. Yet, for all this evidence, debates still swirl. Some historians argue that not every laborer had such good conditions, that the outer edges of the workforce might have included less privileged conscripts. Others counter with the healed bones, the hearty meals, the graffiti that sounds way too cheerful for enslaved men. The truth, like always, is probably layered. Pride mixed with hardship, joy balanced by fatigue. You squat beside the stone foundations, imagining the noise of the village. Donkeys braying, children running, hammers clinking, gossip flying. Someone is mending sandals. Someone else stirs a pot of lentils. Someone sharpens copper chisels for the next day's block cutting. All of this life hummed beneath the shadow of the rising pyramid. And you realize, without these villages, without these very human communities, the pyramids would have remained a dream. It wasn't magic, aliens, or pharaohs alone. It was people, sweaty and stubborn, fueled by bread and beer, who built the impossible. So when you step away from the ruins, sand brushing your ankles, you can almost hear their voices carried on the wind. Not cries of slaves, but the chatter of workers who knew they were part of something eternal, and who probably still teased each other about who could carry the bigger basket of bricks. The village behind you fades into the hush of desert night, and you find yourself facing another puzzle, the vanishing act. For all the noise, dust, and sweat that once filled this plateau, the builders themselves slipped away without leaving clear goodbye notes. Their huts crumbled, their tools rusted, and their voices dissolved into the sand. How did such a mighty workforce simply disappear? You wander through the silence, realizing the pyramids remained, but the bustling life around them did not. One theory whispers that the villages weren't meant to last. They were temporary, built only for the decades-long project. Once the pyramids stood tall, the workers returned to their farms and towns, and the settlement collapsed into mud and dust. Think of it like a pop-up festival. The tents are gone, but the stories linger. Another possibility is more unsettling. Droughts and famines sometimes racked ancient Egypt. Imagine fields refusing to grow, Nile floods faltering, and workers forced to scatter in search of survival. The bones unearthed here show hints of arthritis, heavy wear, and short lives, proof that even with bread and beer, the human body paid the price. Some villagers may have simply worked themselves into the dust, buried in sand too soon. And yet, clues keep surfacing. In some graves near the pyramids, skeletons of workers were laid to rest respectfully, with simple offerings. That doesn't fit the picture of slaves discarded like tools. It suggests they were honored, remembered, part of a collective memory that outlived their muscles. But how long did that honor last before their names, their faces, vanished from history's notebook? Historians argue, of course. Some say the workforce dissolved neatly, absorbed back into Egyptian society. Others insist whole communities disappeared abruptly, perhaps due to disease or disaster. The debates are like footprints in shifting sand. Traces appear, then vanish, leaving you guessing. You crouch beside the faint outlines of a demolished wall. If you squint, you can almost see a woman grinding grain, a child laughing, a man stretching her shoulders after lifting blocks. And then, like smoke, the images fade, leaving only the whisper of wind. Maybe that's the true mystery, not how they disappeared, but how easily memory erases the ordinary lives that supported extraordinary dreams. Pharaohs carved their names into eternity, but the builders' names drifted away. The pyramids remain, while their makers dissolved into dust. And yet, you sense they're not entirely gone. Every time a visitor gasps at the pyramids, every time an archaeologist brushes sand from a pot shard, those long-vanished builders rise again for a heartbeat. Their disappearance is only half the story. The other half is how we keep summoning them back with curiosity. You step away from the ruins, the question echoing in your chest. Where did they all go? The desert gives no answer, only the soft rattle of wind through stone, like laughter buried too deep to hear clearly. The wind shifts, carrying you toward the temples flanking the pyramids, and suddenly the air thickens with something less tangible than stone: ritual. You pass between columns where shadows pool like liquid ink, and you realize the pyramids weren't just monuments of stone but also theaters for ceremony, whispered prayers, and sacred performances that echoed long into the night. You imagine priests wrapped in linen, their shaved heads gleaming in the torchlight, voices rising in hymns that rolled like the Nile itself. Incense smoke curls upward, perfuming the air with resin and myrrh, stinging your nose but strangely calming your chest. Somewhere, a conch shell trumpet moans, and you can almost hear the deep thump of drums timed to match a heartbeat. These rituals were not casual adorns. They were central to the pyramid's purpose. Each stone wasn't just placed with muscle. It was infused with words, chants, and offerings. To the Egyptians, the boundary between work and worship was thin. Moving a block could be prayer, smoothing limestone could be devotion. You might laugh at the idea of your office printer being sacred, but for them, every tool and action echoed eternity. One ritual described in fragmentary texts involved the opening of the mouth ceremony, performed on the statues and perhaps even symbolically on the pyramid itself. By touching sacred tools to the stone, priests believed they granted it the ability to breathe, to speak, to be alive. Imagine treating a skyscraper today like a living organism, patting it on the head before you enter the lobby. A little absurd, a little awe-inspiring. What's stranger is the animal connection. Crocodiles, cats, ibises, all were tied into rituals around kingship and afterlife. Some scholars suggest animals may have been part of temple life near the pyramids. You picture a solemn procession, with a goose waddling along like an accidental VIP guest. Sacred, yet slightly comedic. The most haunting detail? Some underground chambers bear soot marks, suggesting torches lit ceremonies in hidden spaces, rituals sealed off from common eyes. What was whispered there? Spells, confessions, bargains with gods? Archaeologists can only guess. One theory claims the alignment of the pyramid corridors to stars wasn't just engineering. It was part of an ongoing ritual to connect Earth and cosmos. Others shake their heads, insisting the soot is just soot. And again, the arguments swirl. You stand still, listening. The night desert is quiet, but in your mind's ear you can almost hear the murmur of those chants, the rhythmic clap of hands, the deep breath of a civilization trying to stitch itself into the fabric of forever. These weren't empty gestures. They were fuel for the grand machinery of belief. Without ritual, the pyramid was a husk. With it, the pyramid became a living ladder between worlds. You blink and the incense smoke fades. But the sense lingers that even now, some fragment of those whispered rituals still hums in the cracks of the stones, waiting for someone curious enough to press an ear close and listen. The desert grows quiet again, but your mind doesn't. Because once the rituals ended and the builders vanished, something curious happened. The pyramids stopped being only Egypt's story. They became everyone's mystery. And with mystery comes myths. You stroll past tourists snapping photos, and you overhear the kinds of theories that fill documentaries, YouTube rabbit holes, and late-night debates. Aliens, time travelers, Atlanteans, apparently anyone but the Egyptians built these pyramids, if you listen to the wildest storytellers. You can't help but smirk. Imagine dedicating decades of your life hauling blocks in the scorching sun, only for someone thousands of years later to say, "Nah, must have been Martians." If ghosts exist, the workers are probably rolling their spectral eyes. Still, legends stick because they scratch an itch. The scale of the pyramids feels too big for ordinary hands, so people reach for extraordinary explanations. A single stone weighs more than a car, and yet somehow they're stacked with precision tighter than your IKEA furniture. No wonder myths sprouted like weeds. Some modern myths even twist the Sphinx into a prophetic symbol. Stories claim it hides secret chambers filled with Atlantean knowledge, or that its head was once a lion, later reshaped into a pharaoh's likeness. Archaeologists mostly sigh, brush sand off their boots, and point to geology. But debates simmer on, partly because we want mystery. After all, reality, sweaty workers with bread and beer, doesn't sound nearly as glamorous as interstellar architects with laser beams. But myths aren't only modern. Even in ancient times, later Egyptians barely remembered who built the pyramids. By the time Greek historians visited, locals attributed them to semi-mythical kings or even to Joseph of biblical fame. The real pharaohs who ordered the pyramids had already faded into foggy legend. So maybe conspiracy theorists today are just carrying on an old tradition, making up stories when facts feel too dusty. The funny thing is, these myths, as outrageous as they are, keep the pyramids alive in imagination. They become more than stone. They're a blank screen onto which every generation projects its hopes, fears, and sci-fi daydreams. Without the myths, maybe the pyramids would just be weathered hills on the horizon. With them, they remain endlessly fascinating, like a riddle no one can stop picking at. You look up at the stars above Giza. They shimmer exactly as they did when the first myths were whispered, when villagers told tales to their children about the giant tombs rising on the plateau. And you realize myths don't have to be true to be powerful. They just have to keep the story alive. The wind sighs across the desert, almost like a storyteller taking a pause before the final act. And you know, the last whispers of this tale are coming, softer, slower, ready to lull you into quiet.